Hi, I'm Judy Tate. I am a playwright and a teaching artist at Manhattan Theater Club, and I am the founding artistic director of the Stargate Theater Company. Today, I'm here to answer some questions about playwriting, and I'm just going to dive right in. The first question is, where do my ideas come from? And do I have a sudden inspiration, or is it more like gestation? And I'd say it's both, actually. Sometimes it can be a dream or an image or even a question that I have. I wrote a play once about something that happened a long time ago when I was about 13 years old and I didn't understand it. And so I wrote a play to sort of answer, the questions I had about, well, why would people behave that way? Why would somebody do this? I think the most beautiful thing about playwriting is it allows you to put yourself in other people's shoes, and which is the beauty of theater. And so when I'm writing, I get to answer some of those questions like, well, maybe it's something like this, right? Maybe it's something like that. Sometimes I'll read a newspaper article. Sometimes you get a commission, which is a wonderful thing. That's where somebody pays you to actually write a play. And if you get a commission, sometimes they'll tell you what category or what idea you're writing into. It might be a science commission. It might be I got a commission to write something about women's suffrage. And so in that regard, I think about my take on that. Well, what about women's suffrage am I particularly interested in? What is it about science that actually interests me? So they come from places like that. It's usually ideas that I have, you know, um, where I'm wrestling, with trying to understand something in myself and the world. The next question is, do you know how your plays will come out when you start to write them, or do you figure out where it's heading as you write? Um, well, I hope they come out good. I'm only kidding. Um, the answer is no. The short answer is no. I don't know exactly how a play will end, but I do know that I want my characters to undergo some kind of growth, and or to have learned something. I think that's really, really important. Because otherwise, if there's no change there in your character from beginning to end, uh, it's not satisfying. There's nothing to chew on at the end. There's nothing to think about. So you want a character to go through, a pressure cooker and have learned some. It's just like life. When you go through a really hard time, you come out the other side changed. You come out the other side with a better understanding of maybe your ability to withstand difficulty. Maybe you come out with having learned something about the people around you or the world or whatever it is that you had a hard time with. So, I do know that there's going to be growth and change. I will not know exactly where the play might end up. Um, a very wise playwriting teacher friend of mine said, let the characters lead. And I love that because sometimes you hop in and you're writing and, the characters can take you along these really interesting turns. And I like that because sometimes being in their mind, you know, um, it's a vacation from my own. But, but I always have to tap them on the shoulder and say, okay, you've played around, we've gone on a side road, but there is a road here, the road of what you want and how you're going to try to get that. Um, and how you're going to try to surmount the obstacles in getting that. So I think I think that's a pretty fair answer. Um, are there surprises and discoveries along the way? This is great. It's almost like I planted that question. Yeah, when you get inside your character and they go off on a side road and you follow them down that tangent, it could be surprising, and you may end up with some story elements that you hadn't thought of in the first place. I like things like that that sort of unlock my creativity, unlock my staid way of thinking. I'll do something completely random, play some cards, look at the queen, read a newspaper, an article, a book or something, and I'll have my character. What if my character was reading that book? So those things can shake you up in really interesting and very cool ways. I was writing a play once, and I discovered that each scene had a character in it that was sort of, a teacher character or a guide. And I thought to myself, well, wouldn't that be cool if that was just one actor? Also, I've been in the theater for, a long time, first as an actor, then as a writer, teaching artist. And I know that it costs money to have lots and lots of people on stage. So I said, why don't I make, the person one character and let them truly be a guide? So I made them a conductor. And there was a Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters conductor. There was a Chicago L train conductor. There was a conductor on the Kinder transport that transported kids out of London in the 1940s. There was an OBGYN. My main character's father was a doctor, but he said he's just bringing kids into life, and working on life's miraculous railroad. So he was a conductor as well. And it really created a beautiful image system, which had a lot of railroad imagery. The play had a lot of railroad imagery in it. So that was kind of cool. And it was kind of poetic. And a lot of times it was really funny. How long does it typically take to write a play? And what about revising? Well, you're always revising. Most of playwriting is revising. I have learned story structure, and so playwriting is not as long for me as it used to be because I was just stumbling around trying to figure out how things worked together. And most of my playwriting learning has come from trial and error, reading a lot, going to the theater. And like I say, you may know how your story is going to go, so I like to create an outline, a kind of a prose document that helps me map out the character's journey, map out what's going to happen. And, when I'm in that stage, structurally, it's much easier to devise, to revise what you're doing. So, that's what I like to do, because once you've got it in dialogue, it's kind of harder to tease it apart. You don't want your structure to show. You bury it, and so it's easier to revise structure when you're in the pre-dialogue stage. I mean, I don't know how other people just write dialogue and write dialogue and write dialogue and then erase it, but it takes as long as it takes. I've written plays a long time, and I've written plays very quickly. Each one presents its own problems, and each character you write, each play full of characters you write, present their own obstacles. So I don't know. It depends. Oh, but you know what? There's no greater motivation than a deadline. So when I was writing television, it didn't matter whether I felt like it or not. You had a deadline, you wanted to keep your job, you met the deadline. So that's the greatest inspiration that there is. I know I don't, I don't do it just if a director asks me to. I do it because I try to be really ruthless about things that don't seem true. Do you know? And so that's what I try to do. So, if there's one thing, I'm running out of time, but if there's one thing that I could, leave you with two things. One is be kind to yourself as you write. Try to leave your terrible critic behind while you're doing exercises, while you're beginning. But now I'm going to give you advice that seems opposite, but it's sort of not. And that advice is be ruthless about the truth. Be ruthless about cutting things that don't seem right, just because, oh, what a great turn of phrase. So be kind to yourself and be ruthless about the truth. Okay. Thanks for having me. Happy writing.